Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. I am your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very, very accomplished social entrepreneur, if I may call him, Mr. Gaurav Goyal. Gaurav, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here, Ashutosh.
Thank you. Gaurav is the founder and CEO of Samagra, a mission-driven governance consulting firm. So, Gaurav, let's talk Samagra today. Tell me about this venture and your motivation to start it.
Yeah, so the core thesis, Ashutosh, at Samagra is better governance as a lever to create large-scale impact.
Mm-hmm.
Fundamentally believe while a lot of things can be done outside of the system, but if you want to touch millions and millions of people, especially the underprivileged, and transform their lives, one cannot wish away the political and the governance process. Mm-hmm. Therefore, in the 9 years of our existence so far at Samagra, all the work that we've done has been, you can say, quote unquote, with the system. Mm-hmm. In particular, right now, we are focused on working with state governments. We take state as a unit of change. Mm-hmm. And we work with the bureaucratic leadership in the states with typically a mandate at a political executive or the chief minister's level on what we call system reforms or system transformations across a lot of different domains such as school education, health, agriculture, scheme delivery, skilling, and so on. Now, quickly, what is systemic transformation? It essentially says that you're taking a systems thinking approach to take a particular domain in a state from point A to point B. So it's not a point intervention, but instead it's a combination of interventions that will make that change happen. So quick example, if you're talking about school education, on one side, we are talking about things like what should be the right configuration of government schools in a state. Where should a school open? Where should it close? We are talking about how do you get in merit? How do you do merit-based selection of teachers? Keep the teacher transfer process transparent. Build in accountability for learning. So all of these are administrative or management levers, you can say. On the other side, we are talking about things like what should be the examination structure? How should teacher training happen? What should be the right teaching learning material in the classroom? So these can be called technical or academic intervention. So it's a combination of these that would strengthen school education in a state. And that's the approach we take in all our systemic transformation or system reforms work.
Fascinating. So can you, for our viewers and listeners, give me an example? I'm not sure if you can take names, but happy to avoid names completely, of where you have made a systemic change in a particular state.
Yeah. So let me pick one example. I'm very well can take names. So in Haryana, for a period of around 3 years, we worked on overhauling the way government to citizen schemes and services get delivered. So services like getting a driving license, getting an income certificate, a caste certificate, and so on, and schemes such as old age pension, scholarships, and so on. So how does these get delivered to the citizen in a seamless manner, in a convenient manner, and in a time-bound manner? So that's something that we worked on, where we were stationed in the Chief Minister's office. And from there, we coordinated with all the 35 ministries and departments in the state government. We leveraged a lot of technology. So there are some 550 plus schemes and services cutting across these 35 different departments. So got all of them anchored on one technology platform, streamlined the way citizens apply for these. So they could do it online, but they could also do it offline in an assisted mode at their village kiosk, in a city kiosk, or in designated centers that the state government created for these called Saral Kendras. So they could apply it through these. And in a very, I would say, streamlined manner, the applications would get processed within what's called the right to service timeline or a stipulated timeline in which they are supposed to be delivered. So all of this system was set up and led to a huge both increase in the uptake of these schemes as well as reduction in time and generally good citizen ratings.
Amazing. So, now I know who to thank for the incredibly efficient manner in which I got my driving license renewed in Haryana. So you're the person, or Samagra is the person behind, or the organization behind it. Thank you. But Gaurav, I'm going to ask you a question which may be a little cynical, but can governments and bureaucrats really be held accountable, and can they really be performance driven?
Yeah. So that's one of the biggest challenges actually in the entire governance system, which is of performance management. So essentially, how do we manage performance in the corporate world? You can hire people, you can fire people, you can kind of give them incentives, you can give them bonuses, you can kind of do various things. Now, all of these levers that we're talking about here are actually practically absent in the government system.
Very
Right?
true.
So you have massive machinery. You have like state may have 2 lakh teachers. If you're talking about school education, railways has a massive workforce, but you cannot use any of these levers to kind of manage their performance, and therefore you have to rely on a lot of non-financial incentives, carrot and stick, to kind of drive performance there. And therefore the change management, what I'm basically saying is change management becomes that much more difficult. And that's the challenge, one of the biggest challenges I would say with governance. Therefore, it's more complex if you're trying to, let's say, as a corporate consulting firm working with a large corporate, change management is difficult because there are legacy systems and so on and so forth. Government is even more complex because of these constraints that you're working with. So it's difficult. The question is whether it is possible. Yes, you just have to be more creative, more innovative, and of course, over time, fundamental administrative reforms would also help with some of these things.
Very interesting. And a follow-up question to that, I was speaking to some IAS probationers, and when I was growing up, there were only 2 or 3 careers for people of my age group from bureaucratic families where I was born in, which was doctor, lawyer, engineer, or if you're very bright, you could go to the IAS.
Yeah.
So the brightest minds in our country go into the IAS. And the young people are very, very, very ambitious, want to make a change in the government. My question to you is that when does work culture in the bureaucratic or government organizations or with politicians take over and curb the enthusiasm to perform?
Yeah. So two points there, Ashutosh. One is that this thing of the brightest minds in the country going to the bureaucracy, I think that's evolved over time. At the time, probably when you were graduating, definitely that was the case.
Yep.
Now, since 1991, about the last 30 years, it's people are going to various fields, right? So you see the best minds out of the best colleges in the country kind of taking up private sector jobs and so on. So it's a mix. But coming to your point specifically, I think there's an initial phase when you get into the bureaucracy, you get into the IAS in particular, when you were working at a district level and you become what's called a DM or a district magistrate, a district collector. That's when you are essentially running the show in one district. And a lot of people, if you talk about senior bureaucrats today, what were their best times? They'll say when I was a district collector, because you kind of have a lot of flexibility and a lot of freedom to do things. Somewhere between then and when you get to a stage of, let's say, being a secretary or a principal secretary, where you're heading a department in a state, somewhere in between that is somewhere I see at least that enthusiasm gets lost because you don't have enough degrees of freedom to operate with, and you're operating in a lot of constraints. That's one. And then you see that performance doesn't really sometimes matter. Right? You'll grow at the same pace as all your peers who are not doing anything or doing less than you, right? Or you'll kind of, there's no, as I'm saying, incentives for you to kind of do. That's where sometimes it dies down. But again, having said that, there are outstanding officers where the motivation is intrinsic and they're not looking around and looking for external kind of appreciation and incentive. They kind of just are at it. So you'll find 20% of the officers in that bracket who are like driven and competent both.
So, I agree with what you're saying to me, about 20% officers or more maybe have the enthusiasm and are beginning to make a change. But what are some of the governance challenges that you have seen in most of the states in our country? And I believe most states are very similar.
Yeah, states are similar. I think at a macro level, as I said, one is performance management. Since that is tricky, therefore getting any system to move fast becomes tricky. Second is the quality of people getting into the bureaucracy and not just IAS overall. That mix has changed over time, as we were just discussing. Third is a lot of legacy systems. So if you have to do anything new, right? Imagine a startup. To kind of do something new is easier than to change something that's happening from before. So everything in government is quote unquote brownfield. Greenfield things are fairly less. Wherever there are greenfield things, you see fast progress.
Okay.
Right? Aadhaar had to be created. It was a completely new system that had to be put in place, got done really well. Of course, the leadership was great and so on and so forth. But if you have to change something that's existing, which has existed for years, led to a certain behavior, certain vested interests around those things, the change becomes that much more difficult.
Mm.
So the legacy in government is what becomes difficult to work with as well. So I would say these are the 2-3 biggest challenges when it comes to the government system and bringing about change in that system.
Fascinating. So my next question is legacy. Yeah, and you just spoke about it. Whether it's large private sector corporations or the government, the comment that you hear from a lot of young people is, "Yahan to aisa hi hota hai." And I've often argued this, that don't talk of legacy, go in and make a change.
Yeah.
What has been your experience of young, IAS officers or young bureaucrats coming in and then hearing the comment or making the comment, "Yahan to aisa hi hota hai"?
Yeah. So I don't think they come in with that mindset, as you were earlier saying.
Correct.
I think somewhere in that journey, and in my view, that's from the 10-year mark to a 25-year mark. Somewhere in between that, for some of the people, that kind of mindset sets in, because probably they've attempted a set of things to do a bunch of things, if they've been resisted, if they've been constraints, and so on. But we are certainly as a firm not in that bracket. I think there are 2 ways you can approach this. One is you can read the newspaper and you can say, this is what's going wrong in the country, this is what should happen, government should do this, government is not doing that. Or you can say, okay, let us kind of go ahead and try and make this happen with the government. So we are definitely in the second category, trying to be a part of the solution, even if from outside. But I think yes, that's the what you're saying is you can say the majority view, both inside and outside.
And you need a very few people to change a whole system.
Yeah.
But moving on, when I was reading about you, you are pioneering open source to build GovTech products. Help me understand both these terms and how are you using technology?
So as we started doing this systemic transformation work with the state governments, Ashutosh, what we realized is that as part of any such transformation, there are, let's say, 10 to 12 initiatives. Now, given that everything is getting done at scale, it had to be enabled through technology. And we figured out that the quality and the pace of technology in the government was almost holding back these initiatives and therefore the overall reform. And that's when we said about 5 years back that we ought to be investing in building certain capabilities around technology, which can complement the capabilities the governments have, so that we can move fast on this. And that's how GovTech, governance technology at Samagra, basically evolved. It has kind of matured now. We've put it under an umbrella called Samagra X. Now, 2 changes have happened here in these 3-4 years. One, earlier we would say, okay, think of a solution and the implementation of that will be enabled by technology. Now the problem solving itself, the solution design itself is going via technology. So that's one change. The second is that if you talk about more work that we're doing, the newer pieces of work that we're picking up, the component of technology there is much, much higher than ever before. So GovTech to me is the hope, right? If we're going to and we are going to reform as a country, we're going to do things better, it's going to be on the back of technology. We've already seen examples of that through Jan Dhan, Aadhaar, mobile, the trilogy of that, the way payments are reformed, the way direct benefit transfers are happening. Technology is the lever that we have as a country to kind of really leapfrog in governance. And I'm a firm believer in that. I think we are far ahead than a lot of the developed countries also when it comes to technology and governance. I think in GovTech, we can be the leaders in the world when it comes to this. And given the scale of our country, there's actually no other option. It's also a necessity to kind of leverage technology to bring about change. So I'm big.
And tell me, Gaurav, when you look at these changes in terms of how to come in for performance management, accountability, etc., is it very similar in urban India as compared to rural India? Or is the rural Indian still struggling to get small things done?
Yeah. So if you look historically and look now, yes, there is a gap. There is a digital divide. Actually, to leverage anything that's a technology-based solution, you need to have access to technology, and there is that divide. But the speed at which this is getting bridged, I think with the way mobiles have penetrated, the way data is kind of becoming cheaper, and with the various methods that people are innovating of doing technology, you can do it direct or you can do it in an assisted mode. Somebody can help you with technology. For example, the example from Haryana that I was giving you, there's an online platform where you can apply. But if you don't know how to go online and do that, you can go to a village kiosk and someone there would help you do that. Right? So there is this assisted modes of delivery. And there is what's called a phygital mode. So there's a digital and there's something called phygital. So you do things on paper and it kind of automatically gets digitized through technology and so on. So there are ways that are being found out, and somehow I feel it's not going to be a roadblock in this transformation journey. I think the space at which this digital divide is getting bridged, we'll definitely kind of see the benefits of that. I'm very hopeful when it comes to this.
Amazing.
The one point, Ashutosh, sorry, you mentioned around open source, which I kind of didn't.
Yeah, we're going to ask you the same question.
Okay, so the way technology has historically been happening is in government is a service kind of a mode. I have certain requirements as government. I'll get a technology IT company and I'll get them to build that for me. That's a service mindset.
Correct.
A service way of operating. Then there's a product way of operating. There's a bunch of things that exist out there. I'll kind of take that product and use it for my purpose. Now, the thinking or the evolution in the GovTech space is when things are more shifting towards products, towards platforms. When say somebody through philanthropic money, through other money, create these what are called public digital goods. These things get created. They are free of cost. They are open source. Anyone can pick it and use it. And the governments can start using it, customizing them, configuring them for their requirements and start deploying them for their states, for their departments, for their ministries and so on. So more and more things are shifting towards public digital goods, and these are open source and also built on existing open source software, which is globally available, some of them.
Very interesting. And do you get invited by state governments or is it some kind of a tendering process that the governments like to do? I mean, somehow, and I'm so delighted to speak to you, but somehow in my own mind, government is such an insular organization that would say, we know exactly what is good for our country.
Yeah. So we've never participated in any government tender so far in our 9 years. All of the work that we're doing today or have done in the past has been government somehow reaching out to us. And we actually like that because there is somebody who wants to do something and is trying to figure out who can help out with that, and therefore landing up on us and saying, okay, we want to do this, can you guys help with this? Right? I think that starting of the relationship becomes very, very important there. And then through the initial conversations, we figure out that they really want to do it or they're saying that they want to do it. Right? And we establish that they really are keen to do it and they're willing to put the best people on the job and so on. That's when we enter into a partnership with the government. Our fee or our funding comes from a private source, typically a philanthropic source, but arranged by the government. So we're not saying we don't do any fundraising. So we don't want to tell them, okay, we'll come, we'll help you with the stuff also, and we'll get the funding also. No, you figure out funding for us, make some effort, talk to people, talk to organizations who are kind of funding work in this domain. So that comes from the private this thing, but arranged by the government. And the first move is typically made by the government. And that's when we kind of start co-working. It's a very co-working model. Let's together create a roadmap, together create a solution, and then we'll catalyze the implementation of that solution. So it's always a pull-based thing.
Wow, this again is a new thing I've heard from you, where, your fees, the government gets from some either CSR initiative or an NGO, but doesn't pay for it out of their own checkbook.
Yeah. Because the only way government can pay from their checkbook is through a tender process and an RFP process. And everything that we're doing is sometimes it's difficult to capture in an RFP or a tender because it's not as processified. It's fairly abstract in some sense. And secondly, even if you were to capture it, anyone can come and say we'll do at 1/10 the cost. It's a knowledge-based thing, right? It's not a product that you're selling.
Yeah.
And
that really reinforced what you just said, that someone somewhere is really wanting to make a change, to not just reach out to you, but also find a source of funding.
Exactly.
That's
amazing. And in the beginning, our constant this thing, no, it's very difficult. It's not going to happen. This will require this, this will require this, this will require this. So it's almost setting expectations and figuring out that mutual commitment that no, we know it'll take all of this, but we still want to get on this journey.
Amazing. So I have time for 2 more questions for you, Gaurav. My next question to you is on the millennials who are now entering or have entered the workforce in government in the last 10, 12 years. How are they driving change? Because my experience with millennials is that they think very differently, and they have a far, and I may be putting my foot into my mouth, but they have a far greater sense of ethics than people of my generation may have had.
Yeah.
They do not agree with this horrible word in India called jugaad, which older people use all the time. They don't. I'd love to get your perspective.
So Ashutosh, one is the millennials in the government. I think that's something that we'll see. The real impact of that is yet to come, because they are at their initial
Early
stages in their career, and they'll get to positions of responsibility fairly soon, and we'll see that. What I can definitely say with confidence is the millennials in our organization or in the sector who are working closely with government. I think I am amazed every day just by seeing the talent, the professionalism, the perspective, and the commitment of the millennials. If I go back and say 15 years back, I was nowhere close to where I see the young people at Samagra today. And we are a very, very young organization. It's young millennials who are working with senior bureaucrats and who kind of in their 50s, in their 40s, and so on, and really making these large-scale change happen with them. So I am amazed, and I'm extremely optimistic about the potential of this millennial generation in bringing about impact. They're also very purpose-driven. I think they're looking for more purpose and more meaning in their work. More of them are looking for purpose and meaning in their work than probably what our generation used to do. So extremely positive on that. On the government side, as I said, we'll see how that changes governance in the next 10-20 years. Amazing,
and very encouraging. And my last question to you, and this is a question on gender diversity. I've been many people in different parts of the world have said that India is one of the few countries which has managed diversity at its bureaucratic level very, very well. We've got a very large number of women in positions of authority and governance. We may not have done it so well at a political level. What is it that we are doing right? And I'd like to end on a high.
Exactly. I feel a lot more can happen. So, Ramti, my own thing is that even if you look at the bureaucracy, it is still large part of it is dominated by males. But there are women who have made a mark, who continue to make a mark. I don't know the latest numbers in terms of the incoming batches. I think that's where we should look at. I'm hoping that proportion would be increasing by time. I can again talk about Samarth, the 50% women at Samarth. We've not done anything specific to get there. We've not kind of had any policies which will ensure, but just by default, everything being fully meritocratic, no kind of distinction, and we have a gender ratio of 50-50. And again, I'm very hopeful on this front that going forward, both inside the bureaucracy as well as people like us working with the bureaucracy, we'll see a better gender diversity. And there's certain kind of traits or leadership traits in particular that women have, which I feel is extremely valuable to what we are trying to achieve as a country.
Wonderful. Gaurav, on that note, thank you so much for speaking to me. Thank you for talking to me at such length about Samagra and all the amazing stuff you're doing to actually shake up many state governments and actually make them accountable and get them to perform as per standards and as per norms and have a strong feedback mechanism in place. Thank you again for everything that you're doing, and good luck.
Thank you. Thanks, Ashutosh. And again, good speaking to you. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to The Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for The Brand Called You.